This is Algebra 2, Lesson 63 on page 268, addition of vectors. So now we're going to be adding vectors. Most of the time when they ask you to add vectors, they are already in polar form. But in order to add vectors, you have to put them into rectangular form. And I'm also going to show you what they look like on the ACT, because I do see this every now and then on the ACT. All right, so you have to convert the polar, both of them, to rectangular. So something R plus minus something U. Then you're going to add your R and your U values. And then you're going to convert it back to polar. All right? The ACT is real easy. All right, so what are we going to do? First, convert both to rectangular. Then we're going to add the rectangular forms. Then we will convert back to polar. Actually, convert the result of that back to polar. So we'll have just one. We're going to convert the result back to polar form. All right, so it's a multitude of steps. All right, so look at 63.1. It says, flying arrow left the village and traveled 20 miles heading on a heading of 20 degrees. All right, here he is. He travels 20 miles and his angle is 20 degrees. So that's in quadrant 1. And then from this point, he traveled 40 miles heading on a 210 degree. All right, where's 210 degrees? What quadrant? Third. All right, and how far did he travel? How many miles? 40. And it was 210. We're in the third quadrant. All right, so if I'm going this way, if I'm figuring out what this is, I'm adding. If I want to know what theta is, I'm subtracting the 210 minus the 180. Do you understand that? The 210 represents the 180, right? We're at 0, 90, 180, 270, all the way back to 360. The 210 represents the 180 plus this angle. So what's that angle? 30 degrees. All right, so we want to know the R. This R is going to be positive. That U is going to be positive. This R is going to be negative. This U is going to be negative. What trig ratio do we use solving for R? R cosine.
Or they got 30, 60, 90.
Correct, you could use 30, 60, 90. Yes. We haven't gotten there in the textbook yet, though, have we? We did it last year, but we haven't done it quite this year. But yes, we're going to use the 30, 60, 90. Because next year, if you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, calculators are not allowed. All right, so R cosine, U sine. All right, so R is going to equal what? Somebody tell me.
Cosine 20. Is it 40 times the cosine?
This
Of
one.
that one?
Yeah.
So then it's 20 times the cosine.
20 times the cosine of 20 degrees. And U is going to equal
20 sine
20 times the sine of 20 degrees. All right, so someone give me those. Someone give me R, someone give me U. I know they're both going to be positive.
20. R
20
is
cosine
18.
20 is 18.79.
Wait, 18.79R? Yes, okay. Hannah, what's you? Everybody have your calculators today?
It's 6.84.
Yes.
Do you get an extra one?
I actually threw both of these in here. Hannah, what is it?
6.84.
Plus 6.84U. Okay, we're not going to use our calculators for this one. But where do we go? We go opposite.
Isn't it 1 square root of 2, 3?
One
1 square root of 3.
1 square root of 3, 2. What part of the triangle is 2? The hypotenuse. The hypotenuse. And in this triangle, U is related to the hypotenuse how?
It's half.
It's half. All right, so it's going to be negative 15. That's you, Paula. Negative 15U.
Wait, what?
How did you get negative?
Oh, because you put 40 degrees, but
It's 40.
That's
I did put
measurement.
degrees. Yeah, so it should be 20. 20 is half of 40. All right. And what's going to be the value of R? Good job. Negative 20 square root of 3R. All right, Sarah, you add the R's. Yeah.
We were doing square roots instead of decimals?
We're going to end up with decimals. All right, but what are we doing? We're merely adding the R values, which are really your X values, right? Right? I'm going to try to tie this in. And we're adding our U values, which are really our Y values. Okay? Because I'm about to show you what it's going to look like. What is the R? Jaden, what is this value? I think it is going to be well, it's going to be negative.
Negative 13.16.
Okay. We just added them. Okay, this is how it's going to look like on the ACT. Except they're not going to use decimals. This is your R value. That's your U value. And it's going to tell you, it's going to say something like, okay, y'all, this is vector notation. All right, so watch this. It's going to say, this is vector P. Okay, that's vector notation. And this is vector R. They wouldn't call it R. T, maybe. I don't know. Whatever they call it, right? Add the vectors. What are you going to do? That plus that is negative 15.85. And this plus this, negative 13.16. That's all you're going to do on, okay, got it. In fact, we're going to do this next year as well. Except they're going to have easy numbers. It's going to be like 6 and 10 and negative 20 and I don't know, 8, whatever. And you're going to have to add them. But so many people don't know how to add them except we're doing it, aren't we? This is like rectangular form. When it's inside these pointy parentheses and they do vector notation like this. Yes?
What are the P and T vectors?
The name of the vector. So when we name vectors. Okay? All right. But in our textbook, we're using it, doing it like this, but you're not going to be confused when you get to the ACT if they ask you, right? You're just going to say, I'm just going to add the first ones. I'm just going to add the second ones.
So we have to put it back into.
No, not on the ACT. They simply want this. Boom.
What type of it? So they would just give us what's in the brackets? Yes.
Yes. They're going to say, we have two vectors. Vector P, which is, I don't know, 5, 8. I'm making this up. and vector t, which is negative 1, 6. What is the resultant vector? Or it'll say add these vectors. It's 4, 14.
But it's still in UR form.
Leave it this way. This is the answer. Got it? Okay. All right, so I'm going to erase this because in this textbook and in life, you still want to know the direction and the angle. You still want to know the magnitude and the direction. So we are going back to polar. So what quadrant are we in? If both of these are negative, what quadrant?
Third.
Third. Okay, this is negative 15.85. My u is negative 13.16. I don't know what theta is, but remember I'm really going to go 180 plus that theta, right? And I need my magnitude,
Do the 10.
which, yeah, but how do I solve for this, the magnitude?
Pythagorean theorem.
Pythagorean theorem. Okay. Therese, you solve that. What is that value? The length of the vector. Or the magnitude of the vector. This gives you the magnitude or the length of the vector. All right, somebody find the angle. Jesse, you find that angle.
20.6.
20.6. I don't know. Did anybody else get that?
I got it, but it also has I at the end, so.
Ignore the negatives. If your negatives are squared, they should be positive. One of your negatives,
Oh yeah.
you did a negative somewhere.
So you want to solve for theta? Or
Solve for theta, and then tell me the whole angle.
So is theta 83 degrees?
I have no clue. Is theta 83 degrees? Somebody confirm?
You just do third.
Okay, so it's 20 point. Okay, you're going back and doing it.
No, how do you solve, but you don't need 20.6 to solve for the angle, do you?
No. But is that really 20.6? Let me see what the textbook has.
Yeah, I got this.
Okay, good. 20.6 at,
Actually, I put 7.
you got 39.7
Do
here?
you ignore the negatives when you're finding the
Yes,
angle?
yes.
I got 0.0.
You did shift tan. 13.16 over 15.85. Jesse, what'd you get?
Like 13.6.
Shift tan, 13.6 over divided by 15.85.
39.7.
39.7. Add that to 180. And what do we get?
219.
So 219 degrees. This is where the vector ends up being when we add the vector. When we add those two vectors. All right, let's do 63.2. This is more like what your problems will look like. Is everybody good with this? All right, let's look. God bless you. Let's look at example 2. Okay, before we look at example 2, I really want to make this point. All right, everybody look at theta. I'm I'm just going to make this point. When I do the tangent, inverse tan, the tangent is what over what? Is it a positive or a negative number? Why is it positive? Because it's negative over negative, which is a... Okay, so here the tangent is positive. What about the sine?
Negative.
The sine is going to be negative. What about the cosine? Cosine is going to be negative. All right, let's look if it were in the second quadrant. This would then be a positive, and I'm just going to make a number up. And this would be a positive, whatever. I'm not going to make that number up. Okay, so in this quadrant, what is the sign, positive or negative? The sign is positive. What about the cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. It's negative. What about the tangent? Opposite over adjacent. It's negative. All right, let's just go to the fourth quadrant. This is going to be positive. That's going to be negative. That's going to be positive. Okay? Let's start with the sine. Is the sine positive or negative of this angle? Negative. What about the cosine? Which one? Positive. What about the tangent? Negative. The first quadrant, every number's positive, so everything's going to be, okay, that's right. Sine, cosine, tan, all positive. All right, I'm going to teach you something right now. Look at this. In quadrant one, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4 in quadrants. In the first quadrant, they're all positive, right? All three trig ratios are positive. In the second quadrant, only the sine is positive, the other two are negative. You see that? In the third quadrant, the tangent is positive. In the fourth quadrant, the cosine. So they all are. The sine is, the tangent is, and the cosine is positive, right? Okay, there's this great little sentence. All students take calculus. And it tells you what's positive in what quadrant. All students take calculus. Got it? You will be saying that till you're blue in the face next year. All students take calculus. I'm still reminding students, what quadrant are we in? What's positive? What's negative? And you're going to remember, all students take calculus. All S sine, take tangent, calculus, cosine. Got it? It just tells you what's positive, what's negative. Okay, now let's do example 2. I'm going to draw them. We're going to add 30 at 55 degrees. What quadrant am I in? First quadrant.
So the angle is 55.
So it's 30 at 55 degrees. R is positive, U is positive. And we're going to add 10 at 170 degrees. What quadrant am I in? Second. 10, and it's at 170 degrees. What's theta here? Michael, what's my angle going to be that I'm going to use?
The second one, 10 degrees.
10 degrees, excellent. All right, I have to go to rectangular form. All right, Mackenzie, help me with this first one. How do I find the R value? R equals.
Cosine. Well, you have to multiply with something, but I haven't really gotten that far yet.
Okay, what are we multiplying it by?
By 30.
By the length. Why are we doing that? because the cosine of 55 degrees equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse, right? So if we can start out by just multiply. Do you guys understand here how we get from here to here? All right, so our R value is going to be the length of the vector, which I almost write degrees, times cosine 55 degrees. U is going to equal
The same thing except sine.
30 times sine of 55 degrees. All right, you do the first one. You do R. Evie, you do U. You do U. Not really, you do Jesus. But for your calculator problems, let's do the value for U.
R would be 17.21. And U would be 24.574.
All right, Sarah, what are we going to do over here on this one? How we solve for R? This vector. We want the R value. R is going to be positive or negative? Negative R. U is going to be positive or negative? Positive. Excellent. Okay. So how do I calculate the value of R? Okay. X, Y. It's in alphabetical order. Cosine, sine. Do y'all get that? Alphabetical order. R, U. Also in alphabetical order. Okay, so for R, we use the cosine, but we multiply the cosine of how many degrees? 10, that's right, by 10. Ashley, what do we do for you?
It would just be 10 sine 10.
All right. Sarah, get R. Ashley, get the value for you. All right. R is negative. U is going to be positive.
I have U.
What's U?
1.73.
Add my U's for me. 9.84. Add the R's, remembering that 9.84 is negative. 5. Okay. What's your U value?
26.304.
And what is the R value? 7.37. 6 R. What quadrant is this in? The first quadrant. All right, so then we're going back to polar form. 26.30. Somebody solve for the length. Jake, you solve for the length of the vector. Evie, you solve for that angle for me. So Jake, you're solving for the magnitude or the hypotenuse. And theta is just theta in this first quadrant. We don't have to add it, subtract it from anything.
I got 74.36.
74.36.
Or 37.
Okay, 37.
27.31.
0.31. This would be the vector in polar form.